Hello, welcome back. So, this week, pretty slow week, a lot of debugging, a lot of just changing stuff up, trying to make the world look a little more solid. So the first thing that I went in and did was I wanted to utilize both of my blueprints. So I have a terrain chunk blueprint, which is like the static one that is like whenever you spawn in, that was like the main blueprint. And then I have a second blueprint that is the crop blueprint, which is the one that we worked on last week, getting the PCG system working with it to make like all the grass and stuff, right? So before it was spawning all the same tile. Now if you look at it, whenever I'm spawning in like my original land, A, it's a lot smaller, and B, it spawns in both the crop blueprint and the terrain chunk. So the first thing that I needed to do was make them uniform in size. So the terrain blueprint I had scaled up pretty largely, just so each chunk would be longer for the character to walk on, and I would have to generate less total chunks, which was kind of beneficial whenever I was originally making it and debugging it, because there were some issues that were easier to address because it was larger and easier to look at each individual piece. Looking at actually implementing it, the only issue that I noticed was that it was spawning too many chunks at the beginning. The way that I had the chunk set up when it was originally being created was it would be created on a map. The map takes, it's like an array that also takes its location. So an array of a 2D vector, so it would take the XY values of each of the spots. It would take all of those XY values and put them into the map. And then once I actually spawn the chunk, it would add that instance also to the map. So the map would store both the XY variable and its actual like instance of the blueprint. So that was useful because that's how you could despawn them. So, because then you would go through the map and look at and you would use the XY to find the instance that you want and use the map to actually like, delete that instance, which you couldn't do if you were just using an array. The issue with this is that all the logic for the map was stored originally without a instance, because I would create all the XY values before I would spawn it in, obviously. This was creating a problem where it would duplicate the end result, because I would have it go in the map, I would have it spawn, and then I would edit the map to include that instance. So it would go through, it would spawn 0, 0, and then it would create an instance of it at 0, 0. While it was iterating through, it would then find that instance of 0, 0 because it would be added to the map. So the easy way to think about it, right, is that instead of going through 25 times for like a 5x5 grid, it was going through the first 25 times, and each time it was adding more variables, and so then it would go back through an additional 25 times, which isn't what we wanted, because it was basically duplicating everything that it was making. I didn't realize that this was an issue because they were stacking on top of each other, so I couldn't tell that it was an issue. Instead, I just made it 2 variables, so it's an array first and then a map. So it runs through the array and adds to the map and doesn't double up making anything, which is nice. That's what we wanted. Then I adjusted its size, made it look good. Then I realized the PCG system, all the grass and stuff, wasn't working the way I wanted it to. It spawns in randomly, but I need to update the PCG system again to make it so that it spawns relative to the location. But the problem and the issue with that was it was only ever spawning the terrain at 0, 0. So if I go back and actually make it work like it used to, we can go into here, stop that, go into here, change this to this plane. And then you'll notice whenever I spawn it in, it spawns in, but only at the starting spot. Like whenever I get close, it like lags a little bit because all of these different meshes are all spawning right there. I had an old world, like on a different version, where I actually spent a good amount of time working on the crop logic and making it work. So actually implementing all of that will be really easy. The main problem right now is that A, I don't have any of the assets that I need. And then I also obviously want them to like grow. So like each crop would be multiple assets. So that'll be a bit grindy to do. Next week, I'm hoping to get there. Most of the time was spent debugging the PCG system, trying to make it work. So the small things that we did do that actually work is we made all these terrain chunks a lot smaller so that you can put more on, and then they'll kind of randomly, you know, generate and look through. We'll eventually change the weights so that there's a lot more of the terrain than there is of these crop blueprints. But first we need the logic to work. And then we can add in, you know, all the fancy stuff. I was also starting to think about if I went to this map, which is obviously auto-loaded, but the cool part of it is that whenever you like are spawned in, right, and looking around, you see all these mountain ranges and stuff, right? So what I want to start thinking about doing in my little world is going to be adding in some like extra assets far away that mean absolutely nothing, like these mountain ranges, right? Just to add in a little bit of life to the scenery. After working through the PCG issue, I went through and I decided to start thinking about PAX, which is a gaming convention thing in Boston, PAX East. And the focus of it is like for like indie game developers. That's like its big call. And so it's a bunch of indie game developers trying to show off their games with different like stands, and it's a whole event. Tons of people go. It's a good time. I'm going. I went last year, going with a few of my friends, and I decided that I wanted to make these little business cards. So I made some business cards. Hopefully, you know, I'll find people to talk to. See what's up, you know, with the community. Try and get a little bit of networking done. Meet a few people, which will always be good. But I'll get a little bit of a break, can come back with some new ideas, because that's another big thing, is the inspiration from all of these, you know, talented indie developers. So I can see what's up with them, have a little bit of fun. So that's kind of where we're at. I made a spreadsheet as well, just kind of working through the logic for all of the crops. With that all done, that's kind of all I got. Thanks for the comments on the last video, explaining like, you know, what you want to see in these devlogs. That was great. Good information. I always love comments, you know, always looking to improve. That's kind of why I'm doing this, you know, trying to get better at it every week, which is, I think, important, right? Small improvements make a big difference. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, Discord, TikTok, in the description. Feel free to check it out. That's all I got. Peace.